Have you ever noticed how the heaviest pain is not always from illness or injury, but from the quiet ache of the heart? It's the feeling that comes when you sit by the phone, waiting for a call that never comes. Or when you hear that your children were in town but didn't stop by. Or when a close friend, who once promised to visit every week, now barely sends a holiday card. It's not just the silence that hurts. It's the expectation that was never met. As an aging specialist who has worked with seniors for more than 30 years, I can tell you something that is both liberating and challenging to hear. The greatest source of emotional suffering in our later years often comes from expecting too much and from expecting it from the wrong places. I've seen it across the United States, from the bustling streets of New York to the quiet neighborhoods of Iowa. Seniors, often generous and loving, give their time, their money, their hearts. And deep down, many believe that all this giving guarantees love and care in return. It feels natural. It feels fair. But life, as you've probably learned by now, does not always operate on fair. The truth is, unmet expectations activate the same regions in the brain as physical pain. Functional MRI scans, conducted at institutions like UCLA and Harvard, show that the anterior cingulate cortex, the area that registers hurt feelings, lights up in the same way whether you've been physically injured or emotionally let down. This is why the sting of disappointment can linger as long as a bruise, and sometimes far longer. And yet, here's the paradox. If we can lower or release those expectations, we often find a new kind of freedom, one where peace replaces bitterness, and contentment fills the space where resentment used to live. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the science, the stories, and the practical steps that can help you reduce expectations, avoid unnecessary heartbreak, and embrace the kind of peace that makes life in your 60s, 70s, and even 80s a season of joy. But before we dive in deeply, I have a request. If you're watching this and you value conversations about aging well, about health, happiness, and the wisdom that only years can bring, please subscribe to this channel. It's free, it's easy, and it ensures you'll never miss the life-changing lessons we share every week. And I ask you to watch until the very end of today's video, because the last story I'll tell you might change the way you see both giving and receiving for the rest of your life. Why high expectations hurt more as we age. When we are young, expectations are everywhere. We expect to graduate, to get a job, to start a family, to travel, to make it somehow. And when those expectations don't happen exactly as planned, we still have time to adjust, to try again, to start over. But as we grow older, our relationship with time changes. A year in your 20s feels like a small chapter. A year in your 70s feels like a whole volume. And because the horizon feels closer, the weight of disappointment grows heavier. Let's talk about what science tells us. Our brains are designed to predict. Every time we anticipate something, a visit, a conversation, a gift, our brain releases a little bit of dopamine, the anticipation chemical. This is nature's way of motivating us. But when the event doesn't happen, dopamine levels drop, and we feel that sudden emptiness. Older adults process this drop more intensely for a few reasons. With age, serotonin production naturally decreases, which can amplify feelings of sadness. Physical changes in the brain's prefrontal cortex can reduce our ability to reframe disappointments quickly. A life investment's decades of giving to family, friends, and community create a stronger sense that we've earned certain returns. A 2018 study published in the Journals of Gerontology found that older adults who held high, rigid expectations of their children reported twice the rate of depressive symptoms compared to those with more flexible expectations. Interestingly, the study also found that these same adults were not necessarily more loved or cared for. Their expectations did not produce better treatment, only more pain when those expectations were unmet. Why it feels so personal. When you've spent years sacrificing, working overtime, skipping vacations, cooking meals, giving money, you build an inner narrative. I did all this for them, so they will be there for me. And sometimes they are. But sometimes they're not, and it's not always because they don't love you. Your children might live 500 miles away and be raising kids of their own. Your friends might be managing health issues you can't see. Society itself moves faster now. The average American adult works nearly 44 hours a week, and the pace of life leaves little room for deep connection unless it's actively prioritized. Yet, without consciously adjusting expectations, each no-show visit, each missed call, can feel like a deliberate rejection. This is where the damage happens, not in the event itself, but in the meaning we attach to it. A common pattern I see in my work. Let me tell you about Margaret, a 74-year-old retired nurse I worked with in Phoenix, Arizona. She raised 3 children on her own after her husband passed. She paid for their college tuition, babysat her grandchildren, and even loaned her eldest son money to buy his first home. In her mind, all this meant that in her later years, her children would check on her daily, include her in family decisions, and make her feel valued. But in reality, her son and daughters visited only on major holidays. Phone calls came once every 2 weeks. When Margaret fell and injured her hip, her neighbor drove her to the hospital because her children were out of state. Her words to me still echo, "I feel invisible to the people I gave my life to." We spent months working on reframing her expectations not to lower her self-worth, but to remove the trap of relying on specific behaviors from others for her happiness. Slowly, she began finding fulfillment in volunteering at a local library, where she read to children. She built friendships with other seniors, started painting again, and learned to celebrate the moments her children did show love, without measuring them against a mental scorecard. The shrinking social circle. It's also important to recognize that as we age, our social circle naturally becomes smaller. The average American over 65 reports having fewer than 4 close friends, compared to about 7 in early adulthood. This isn't necessarily bad. Fewer, deeper connections can be more fulfilling, but it means each relationship carries more emotional weight. And when one of these few people lets us down, the impact can feel enormous. This is why it's critical to diversify your sources of joy. If all your emotional eggs are in one basket, say, your children's attention, then a missed visit feels like a deep wound. But if you also find joy in gardening, in a walking group, in a faith community, in learning something new, that wound doesn't cut as deeply. The "oh me" trap. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: love given with the expectation of repayment is not the same as unconditional love. This doesn't mean you should accept neglect or mistreatment. Boundaries are healthy and necessary. But building your entire sense of worth around what you get back is a recipe for disappointment. In the next section, which we'll explore in part 2, we'll talk about the 3 most common areas where expectations become traps for older adults, from children, from life circumstances, and from relationships and friends. We'll break down the science, the cultural shifts, and the personal habits that can either protect you from heartache or keep you stuck in it. But for now, I want to leave you with this thought: your peace of mind is too precious to hand over to the unpredictability of other people's actions. You can still love deeply, give generously, and stay connected without making your happiness dependent on someone else meeting your expectations. Part 2. The 3 most common areas of unhelpful expectations. In Part 1, we discovered that unmet expectations in later life can hurt just as much as physical pain, and sometimes even more. We looked at how brain chemistry, life investment, and a shrinking social circle can magnify disappointment. Now let's explore where these expectations tend to cause the most pain, and how you can approach each area in a healthier, more balanced way. 1. Expectations from children and grandchildren. Let's start with the most delicate subject: family. For most parents, the bond with their children is unlike any other. From the first moment you held that tiny newborn, all wrapped in a blanket weighing just 7 or 8 pounds, you poured yourself into them. You lost sleep so they could rest. You gave up vacations so they could go to summer camp. You stayed up late making sure their science project, the one due in the morning, looked just right. In the American cultural story, parents sacrifice for children, and in return, children are expected to care for parents in their old age. It's almost an unspoken agreement. But in real life, that agreement is not always fulfilled. Why this happens more often today. Life has changed dramatically in the last 40 years. In 1980, the average American adult lived within 15 miles of their parents. Today, it's common for adult children to live several states away. Careers often require relocation, and dual-income households leave less free time for caregiving. The U.S. Census Bureau reports that the median distance between adult children and their mothers is now about 18 miles, but for many families it's hundreds or even thousands of miles. Add to that the fact that today's younger generations face economic pressure, student debt, rising housing costs, medical expenses, and you have a recipe for less time, less money, and less attention available for aging parents. The silent hurt. Many older adults don't say it out loud, but they feel an unspoken resentment when their children don't call regularly or visit for long stretches of time. Some quietly keep score: I called last week, so they should call this week. Others expect help with errands or yard work, only to be met with "I'm too busy" or "maybe next month." This resentment grows not because of the events themselves, but because of the meaning attached to them. We start interpreting their absence as a lack of love, rather than a reality of their busy or complicated lives. A story from my work. I once worked with James, a 78-year-old retired mechanic in Ohio. His son lived 1,200 miles away in Texas. James complained constantly that his son never comes home, visiting only once every 2 years. But when I asked James if he told his son how important those visits were to him, he admitted he hadn't. He assumed his son should just know. When James finally opened up during a phone call without guilt-tripping, just honestly sharing his feelings, his son was surprised. He explained that flights were expensive, his kids had demanding school schedules, and he feared his father didn't really want help. That conversation led to a compromise. Instead of a big in-person visit once every 2 years, they began scheduling monthly video calls and one extended summer visit. The lesson here: we can lower the emotional weight of our expectations by communicating openly, without accusation, focusing on quality of connection over frequency, diversifying emotional support so that our children are not the sole source of companionship. 2. Expectations from life circumstances. The second area where expectations hurt us is in what we believe life should look like in our later years. When we were younger, we pictured retirement as a golden era, traveling the country in an RV, spending winters in Florida, enjoying backyard barbecues with friends, and living without financial worry. And for some, that happens. But for many, health challenges, financial setbacks, or unexpected caregiving responsibilities reshape the picture. The gap between vision and reality. Researchers call this the expectation gap, the distance between what we imagined and what actually is. The wider the gap, the greater the dissatisfaction. For example, you pictured your retirement home as a lakefront cabin, but your budget allows for a modest apartment in town. You expected to travel abroad every year, but your spouse's health limits long trips. You plan to be active and independent at 75, but arthritis or a heart condition makes certain activities difficult. Why the gap feels sharper with age. In our later years, we often believe our big chances to shape life have passed. When expectations aren't met, it can feel like we've run out of time to change the outcome. This can lead to regret, which is one of the most corrosive emotions for older adults. Scientific insight. Neuroscientists have found that regret activates the same brain circuits as fear, specifically the amygdala and the orbitofrontal cortex. This means the body physically reacts to regret: increased heart rate, shallow breathing, even muscle tension. Chronic regret has been linked to higher rates of depression and anxiety in seniors. Rewriting the story. The key is not to erase disappointment but to reinterpret it. One client of mine, Patricia, dreamed of visiting Italy with her husband after retirement. But a year before they planned to go, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and long-distance travel became unrealistic. For months she grieved not just the trip, but the life she thought she'd have. Eventually, with encouragement, she began exploring Italy at home. She joined a local Italian cooking class, learned basic conversational Italian, and started hosting friends for themed dinners. The joy she found wasn't a replacement for the trip, but it was a new chapter she might never have discovered otherwise. 3. Expectations from relationships and friends. The third area that often causes pain is expecting our friends and peers to behave a certain way to keep in touch, remember birthdays, show up for events, or offer help without being asked. Why friendships can fade. Friendships formed in our younger years often had the glue of shared routines, seeing each other at work, school events, church, or through children's activities. As those routines fade, maintaining connection requires more intentional effort. And not everyone puts in that effort equally. Some friends may drift away because of health challenges, family demands, or even changes in personality as they age. This can feel like a betrayal, but often it's simply life taking people in different directions. The emotional impact. A 2020 study in psychology and aging found that older adults who felt socially neglected, even if they had family contact, were more likely to report feelings of loneliness and physical pain. Loneliness, in turn, has been linked to a 26% increase in early mortality, according to research from Brigham Young University. A real-life example. George and Robert were golfing buddies for 20 years. But when Robert's wife became ill, he stopped playing and rarely returned calls. George took this personally at first, believing Robert was avoiding him. Later, George learned that Robert had been overwhelmed with caregiving responsibilities and depression. By then, the friendship had cooled, and reconnecting felt awkward. This is why, when friends seem distant, it's worth asking, is this about me, or about what's happening in their life? Often, it's the latter. Bringing it together. In these three areas, children, life circumstances, and friendships, the common thread is this: when we tie our happiness to other people's actions or to an idealized picture of life, we set ourselves up for disappointment. But by shifting our focus inward toward what we can control, toward creating joy in multiple areas of life, toward communicating clearly and releasing silent scorecards, we can protect our peace of mind and heart. In Part 3, we'll explore the practical strategies for releasing these expectations. The gratitude replacement method backed by neuroscience. Building a diversified emotional portfolio. The art of low expectation, high appreciation living. Daily practices to strengthen inner resilience. And of course, we'll end with a closing story that brings everything together and a gentle but firm call to action for our viewers. Part 3. Strategies and closing. In Parts 1 and 2, we explored why unmet expectations in later life can feel so heavy and how they often cluster in three main areas: family, life circumstances, and friendships. Now it's time to shift from understanding the problem to building a toolkit for peace of mind and joy. This part is about practical, science-backed strategies that you can use starting today to release harmful expectations without giving up on meaningful connection or personal dreams. 1. The gratitude replacement method. The problem. When an expectation isn't met, our mind naturally replays the disappointment. For example, if your granddaughter promised to visit on Sunday but didn't show up, your mind might replay that no-show all day, even all week. The neuroscience behind it. The human brain has a negativity bias. Evolution wired us to remember disappointments and threats more than neutral or pleasant events, because being alert to danger helped our ancestors survive. But in the modern world, this bias often traps us in cycles of rumination. The method. The gratitude replacement method works like this. 1. Notice the disappointment as soon as it arises. 2. Acknowledge it without judgment. I'm feeling let down because I was looking forward to her visit. 3. Replace the mental replay with a gratitude focus. I'm grateful she called last week, or I'm grateful for the flowers blooming outside. 4. Keep the gratitude statement specific, not general, for maximum emotional effect. Why it works. Studies from the University of California, data show that daily gratitude practice increases dopamine and serotonin neurotransmitters that boost mood while decreasing cortisol, the stress hormone. A real-life story. Margaret, 74, told me she used to spiral into sadness whenever her children cancelled a plan. She began practicing this replacement technique. At first it felt forced, but over time, her brain started automatically scanning for small blessings instead of marinating in what was missing. It doesn't erase the disappointment, she told me, but it shrinks it down to size. 2. Building a diversified emotional portfolio. The financial metaphor. In finance, we are told not to put all our money into one investment. If that one stock crashes, we lose everything. The same applies to our emotional life. If all your joy is tied to one person, one hobby, or one outcome, a setback in that area can hit you devastatingly hard. How to diversify emotionally. Multiple connections. Cultivate relationships across different circles: family, friends, neighbors, community groups. Multiple purposes. Have more than one source of meaning: volunteering, learning a skill, gardening, mentoring younger people. Multiple joys. Spread your sources of pleasure: music, nature walks, puzzles, cooking, writing letters. Why it works. Social scientists at Harvard Study of Adult Development, the longest-running study on human happiness, found that older adults with varied social and personal interests report significantly higher life satisfaction and lower rates of depression. A real-life story. Frank, 80, used to rely almost entirely on his weekly poker game with 3 lifelong friends for social interaction. When 2 of them passed away and one moved to be near his grandchildren, Frank felt crushed. With encouragement, he joined a local veterans coffee group, took up photography, and started mentoring at a high school auto shop. Now, he says, if one thing falls through, I still have other things to look forward to. 3. The art of low expectation, high appreciation living. What it means. It doesn't mean expecting nothing. It means setting your expectations low enough to be pleasantly surprised and keeping your appreciation high for whatever does happen. The mindset shift. Instead of thinking, my son should visit twice a month, think, if my son visits once this month, I'll be thankful. If he calls, that's even better. The joy comes from seeing any gesture as a gift, not a requirement. The science. A study from University College London found that happiness is not about how well life is going, but about how it goes relative to expectations. Participants who set lower, realistic expectations, and then experienced outcomes above that baseline reported higher day-to-day happiness. A simple practice. At the start of each week, write down one thing you hope will happen and two things you will be grateful for regardless of whether that hope is fulfilled. This anchors your mind to appreciation rather than entitlement. 4. Daily practices for inner resilience. Here are 4 daily habits that strengthen your inner stability, so unmet expectations don't shake you as deeply. 1. Morning grounding. Before getting out of bed, name 3 things you can appreciate right now: your health, a comfortable bed, the sound of birds outside. 2. Movement. Even 15 minutes of gentle walking or stretching boosts mood-regulating chemicals in the brain. 3. Connection micromoments. Call a friend for 5 minutes, wave to a neighbor, chat with the cashier. These small interactions accumulate into a stronger social safety net. 4. Evening reflection. Write down one thing that went well today, no matter how small: a good cup of coffee, a nice sunset, a friendly conversation. 5. I once met Elaine, a 79-year-old retired librarian, at a community center talk. She told me she used to feel invisible to her grown children, who lived far away. Every holiday she'd wait for a card or a call and feel hurt when it came late or not at all. 6. One day, after a long, lonely Thanksgiving, she decided to change her approach. She invited 3 neighbors, 2 widows, and a single man with no family nearby to share a potluck dinner. That night, her tiny apartment was filled with laughter, the smell of roasting turkey, and the warmth of new friendships. 7. The next day, her daughter called. Instead of answering with hurt in her voice, Elaine said, "Oh, honey, I had the loveliest holiday. Tell me about yours." That simple shift from waiting to creating changed everything. Her relationship with her children improved because her happiness no longer depended entirely on their timing. 8. Elaine told me, I stopped measuring my life by what didn't happen and started filling it with what could happen. 9. My friends, expectations are not our enemies, but unmanaged expectations can steal our peace. At this stage in life, our time is too precious to let disappointment rule our hearts. When we release the grip of should and embrace the surprise of what is, we open ourselves to joy in places we never thought to look. 10. So here's my gentle challenge for you. This week, lower one expectation you've been holding tightly. Replace it with gratitude for something you already have. Diversify your emotional portfolio. And notice how much lighter you feel. 11. If this message has spoken to you, I invite you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next conversation. Share this video with someone who might need the reminder today. And in the comments below, tell me, what's one expectation you're ready to release? 12. Your story might inspire someone else, and you might find you're not alone in this journey. 13. Thank you for spending this time with me. May your days ahead be filled with peace, purpose, and quiet joy. 14. Please follow our other videos for more valuable lessons. Thank you for listening to our story. Wishing you a beautiful day filled with all good things.